The storm had been raging for days, tearing across the surface of the planet like a living thing. Once, the world had been bright and full of life. Green forests, silver cities, and wide skies filled with songs. Now it was only water and wind. Endless dark waves crashed against the ruins of towers that once touched the clouds. Lightning lit up the sky, showing how deep the planet had sunk into chaos. Near what used to be the capital, one last tower stood against the storm. Its foundation shook, its top swayed, but a small light still burned there. Inside that tower, an alien mother wrapped her trembling arms around her child. Her silver skin was covered with dust and salt, and her long white hair stuck to her face. The child, no more than 5 years old, cried softly, afraid of the thunder that broke the sky open again and again. "Shh, my little one," the mother whispered, holding her close. "It's just the sky speaking. It cannot hurt you." But she didn't believe her own words. Every hour the waves climbed higher, creeping up the tower like hungry hands. The lower floors were already gone, swallowed by the sea. Only this top level remained dry, and even that was fading fast. She moved to the broken window, clutching her child tightly. The world below was gone. Metal ships floated upside down in the water, their fires hissing out under the rain. Huge pieces of buildings turned slowly in the flood. The whole planet, once filled with billions of lives, now felt empty. "Is anyone still out there?" she whispered into the storm. Her voice cracked. For 3 days she had sent distress signals. No one answered. The Empire had fallen silent. The trade routes had been abandoned. No rescue ships came anymore. She looked at her small daughter, bright eyes, blue skin faintly glowing in the dark. The child didn't understand what was happening. She still smiled sometimes, asking, "Mama, when will we go home?" The question cut through the woman's heart every time. There was no home left. Then suddenly a faint sound came through the tower's broken comms panel. A static crackle, a ping. The mother froze, heart racing. She rushed to the panel and pressed the cracked receiver. The old device flickered weakly, showing one single blip on the radar, a ship far away but moving toward the planet. "Someone's coming," she whispered, half in disbelief. Her hands shook as she tried to send a signal. "This is Survivor Unit Vanna Terrell requesting evacuation. Please respond." Only static answered, but the ship was still on the radar. It was real. She tried again and again, shouting into the mic. "Please, I have a child. The planet is lost. We need help." Finally, her daughter tugged her arm. "Mama, look." Outside the window, the horizon flashed. Not lightning this time, but a straight line of light cutting through the clouds. A cruiser entering atmosphere. But something was strange about it. It wasn't an Empire ship. The shape was rough, uneven, and old, like the ones used by scavengers and traders long ago. The mother's hope wavered. "A human ship," she whispered softly. The word carried fear. Humans had not been seen in this sector for years. Some said they fled after the war. Others said they hunted what was left behind. The tower groaned again, breaking her thoughts. The structure was giving way. Cracks ran along the walls and water began to seep through the floor. She had no time left. Holding her daughter close, she looked once more at the small light blinking on the radar. "If they're human," she whispered, "then may the stars have mercy." She took a deep breath and began to climb higher toward the roof. The stairwell trembled, broken pieces falling into the black water below. The child coughed, scared and weak. "It's okay," the mother said again, though her voice trembled. "Just a little more." At last they reached the top, an open platform with nothing but wind and rain. From there she could see it clearly now, a large cargo cruiser, its engines glowing orange, pushing through the storm. Lightning flashed across its metal hull, revealing markings from a forgotten Earth fleet. Tears filled her eyes. "He's really coming," she whispered. She activated her beacon again, this time pointing it straight at the ship. The tower shook violently. Pieces fell into the sea below, sending waves crashing up to her feet. The child screamed, "Hold on!" she shouted, kneeling beside her daughter and wrapping her in her arms. Through the roaring wind, she thought she heard a voice, faint through the comms. "This is Captain Reed of the Arkstone. Hold tight. I'm coming down!" Her heart leaped. A real voice. A human voice. The tower tilted, the foundation giving up its last strength. The mother pressed her forehead against her daughter's and whispered, "Please, stars, don't let him be too late." And as the cruiser's lights broke through the rain, descending like fire through the clouds, the final support beam beneath them snapped. The last tower of a dying world began to fall, and their only hope was still fighting the storm to reach them. The flood swallowed everything below. The storm screamed louder than ever, but through the chaos, one tiny blue light still blinked on the radar, a signal that refused to die. Somewhere beyond the clouds, a human ship roared closer. Captain Reed hadn't planned to be anywhere near this cursed part of space. His ship, the Arkstone, was supposed to be heading toward the trade lanes near Vega, not into the edge of a planetary death storm. But fate had a habit of laughing at his plans. For 3 days his cruiser had been limping through lightning storms, its hull groaning, engines coughing like an old man trying to breathe. He sat in the pilot chair, boots up, staring at the dark swirl of clouds on the display screen. Dead world, he muttered. No reason anyone would be down there. The radar pulsed weakly in the background, run until a faint ping appeared. 1, then 2. Life signs. Reed frowned, leaning forward. That can't be right. He adjusted the scanner, tapping the controls with a grease-stained hand. The reading stayed, 2 signals close together, barely moving, near what looked like a collapsing tower. The system tagged them unknown life forms. Great, he sighed. Could be corpses, could be ghosts. He should have ignored it. He'd been a soldier once, and he knew how these things went. One small detour, one act of pity, and you ended up dead. But something in the silence between the thunderclaps made him hesitate. Maybe it was the memory of a voice long gone telling him, "You don't turn away when someone's still breathing." He turned off the autopilot and gripped the controls. Let's see who's stupid enough to still be alive down there. The Arkstone groaned as it cut through the atmosphere. The storm hit immediately. Black rain slamming against the hull, lightning crawling across the glass. Warning lights flashed red across the control panel. Yeah, I know, I'm an idiot, he muttered to the ship as if it could argue. Outside, the world was chaos. Whole cities lay drowned, their skeletons rising out of the water like ghosts. The scanner beeped again, closer now. He zoomed in and saw the signal moving. One of them was still alive. All right, he said quietly. Let's make this quick. He dropped the ship lower, engines fighting the wind. The Arkstone wasn't built for rescue missions. It was a cargo hauler patched with scrap metal, held together by duct tape, grit, and sheer stubbornness. But it still flew, and right now that was all that mattered. Through the rain, he spotted the tower, or what was left of it. The top swayed dangerously. Debris swirled in the flood below. Then a flash of movement caught his eye. A woman, silver-skinned, clutching something small in her arms. Not ghosts, he whispered. They're real. He switched on the external speakers. Hold tight. I'm coming in. The mother turned her head sharply, shielding her child from the wind. Reed saw her eyes, glowing faintly blue, full of fear and disbelief. She didn't trust him. He didn't blame her. Out here, trust was a dying language. He pressed the comm. I can't stay long. The tower's going down. You need to jump when I say. Her voice came back, crackling through the static. You are human. Yeah, he said, bracing the controls. Lucky for you, I don't take days off. He lowered the rear ramp. Wind screamed into the cargo bay. The ship rocked violently. One more lightning strike and they'd both be part of the ocean. Come on, he muttered through gritted teeth. Come on. The mother hesitated, gripping her child tighter. The tower's walls split. Water burst through. The floor tilted. Reed shouted into the comm again. Now! Jump now! And she did. For one terrifying moment, Reed saw her leap into nothing, a blur of blue and silver falling through the storm. The child slipped from her arms midair. Reed didn't think. He left the chair, sprinted down the corridor, and slammed the emergency override on the ramp doors. The wind hit him like a punch. He leaned out, rain blinding his eyes, and reached forward just as the tiny figure fell toward the sea. He caught her. Barely. The child's small hands clung to his sleeve, her eyes wide with terror. Then another weight hit him, the mother, drenched, exhausted, slamming into the metal ramp. Reed grabbed her arm, pulling her up with a grunt. Got you? The ramp retracted, sealing shut as the tower behind them finally broke apart, collapsing into the endless water below. Inside, the noise died down to a dull hum. Reed slumped against the wall, breathing hard. The woman lay on the floor, holding her child, shaking but alive. He looked at them, two strangers from a dying world, and let out a long, tired sigh. "Well," he said, wiping rain from his face, "guess dinner just got complicated." The child looked up at him, blinking through the tears. "You came," she whispered softly, voice trembling. Reed gave a half smile. "Yeah, kid. I came." Outside, the storm still raged, but the Arkston rose higher through it, pushing toward the stars and carrying 3 lives that should have never met. Bound now by one impossible rescue in the middle of the end of a world. And somewhere deep inside him, Captain Reed felt something he hadn't felt in years, the strange, dangerous pull of hope. The thunder never stopped. It rolled across the sky like the growl of some angry god, chasing the Arkstone as it fought to stay steady. Inside the ship, alarms blinked red, engines strained, and Captain Reed gripped the flight stick hard enough to make his knuckles turn white. He'd been through battles, through asteroid fields, even through black market chases on pirate moons, but nothing compared to flying through a dying planet's last breath. "Hold together. Baby," he muttered to his ship, sparks raining from the overhead panel. Just a little longer. Through the front window, the ocean boiled below. Waves as tall as mountains smashed against sinking buildings, and twisted metal floated like broken bones. And in that chaos, he could still see them. 2 figures huddled near the edge of the ramp, soaked and shaking. The alien woman and her little girl. He'd pulled them out of the jaws of death, but now they were all trapped in the storm together. The mother still held her child tightly, eyes full of panic as the ship rattled again. She didn't speak. She just stared at him, waiting, testing to see what kind of human he was. Reed adjusted the stabilizers, trying to gain altitude. "You might want to sit down," he called out over the noise. "Unless you like roller coasters." The woman didn't move. "The tower," she said softly, her voice trembling. "It's gone." Reed nodded without looking back. "Yeah, it's gone." She turned to the window, staring at the endless water below. Her lips moved like she was whispering a prayer. Reed didn't disturb her. He just kept the ship flying, even though every warning light told him he shouldn't. Finally, he spoke. "You got a name?" There was silence for a few seconds before she answered. "Vanna," he nodded. "All right, Vanna, I'm Reed, and the little one?" The child peeked from behind her mother's arm. Her big blue eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Leary," she said, almost too softly to hear. Reed smiled faintly. "Nice to meet you, Leary. Sorry about the weather." A tiny laugh escaped the child before she hid her face again. It was the first sound of life he'd heard in hours that didn't belong to thunder or machinery. He guided the ship higher, breaking through thick gray clouds. The storm's roar began to fade behind them, replaced by the softer hum of the engines. Stars flickered faintly above like tiny sparks of hope. They'd made it out. For a long time, no one spoke. The mother rocked her child gently, whispering something in her own language. Reed could tell it was a lullaby. He'd heard 1,000 songs in 1,000 worlds, but something about this one felt older, sadder. After a while, she looked up at him again. "Why did you come?" Reed didn't answer right away. He checked a few readings, adjusted a switch, then leaned back in his chair. "I saw your signal," he said. "Didn't feel right ignoring it." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You're human. Last I checked. Humans don't come to this system anymore. Guess I missed the memo." He gave a half grin. "Besides, I don't like rules much." Vanna looked at him quietly for a moment. Then she whispered, "You risked your life for strangers." Reed shrugged. "You and your kid didn't look like much of a threat." She didn't smile, but something in her expression softened. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe for the first time in years she wanted to believe someone could still be kind without reason. Suddenly, a small alarm beeped. Reed looked at the monitor. Fuel reserves barely 12%. The Arkstone couldn't fly forever. He muttered under his breath, "Of course. Should have known it wouldn't be that easy." He turned toward her. "We're safe for now, but we'll need to land soon." "My ship's running on fumes," Vanna frowned. "There's nowhere left. Every nearby moon was evacuated." "Every colony gone," Reed sighed. "Then I guess we'll have to find a place that isn't on any map." The child tugged at his sleeve. "You saved us," she said. "Are you a soldier?" He froze for a second before replying. "Not anymore," she smiled shyly. "You're still brave." Reed looked away. Brave wasn't the word he'd use. Maybe foolish. Maybe desperate, but brave? No. Brave had died a long time ago, on some battlefield whose name he couldn't even remember anymore. Outside, the storm slowly faded behind them. The planet below disappeared under thick gray clouds, its surface now a vast ocean with no survivors left. Reed took a deep breath and shut off the external feed. For the first time in years, he had passengers. For the first time in years, someone had looked at him like he was something more than a man running from his past. He didn't know what came next. Maybe they'd crash, maybe they'd starve, maybe the whole galaxy would come hunting for them. But right now, as the Arkstone floated between the stars, Captain Reed knew one thing for certain. He wasn't flying alone anymore. Hours passed since the storm, but the silence inside the Arkstone felt heavier than thunder. The ship drifted through space, engines humming softly, lights flickering every few minutes. Reed sat in the cockpit, one hand on the control stick, the other rubbing the scar that ran along his jaw. He couldn't stop thinking about the look in that alien woman's eyes, half fear, half disbelief. She hadn't thanked him. She hadn't trusted him either. And maybe, he thought, she had every right not to. In the cargo bay behind him, Vanna and her daughter rested near a wall of supply crates. Reed had given them old blankets and a heating lamp. The air was cold, the kind that bit through metal and skin. But the child had fallen asleep anyway, her tiny head resting on her mother's lap. Vanna sat awake, staring into the dim glow of the ship's emergency lights. Her long hair hung in tangled silver waves, still damp from the flood. Every sound of the ship, every creak, every groan of the metal made her tense. She had never been this close to a human before. Back on her homeworld, the elders spoke of humans like a story told to frightened children, restless, unpredictable, capable of kindness one moment and destruction the next. And now one had saved her. She looked toward the front of the ship, where Reed worked quietly, fixing something under the dashboard. Sparks flew, lighting his tired face for a second at a time. He wasn't like the soldiers she'd heard about. No uniform, no rank, no polished gear. Just an old flight jacket, patched and torn, and eyes that looked like they'd seen too many goodbyes. Reed noticed her watching and said without turning, "If you're wondering whether the ship's about to explode, it's not. Probably." Vanna frowned. "You joke easily." "Better than screaming," he replied, pulling out a burnt wire. "Trust me, I've tried both." Her voice was quiet when she asked, "Why are you here?" This world was forbidden after the evacuation. The Empire closed the route. He leaned back, wiping his hands on his pants. "Let's just say I stopped following orders a long time ago." Something flickered in her expression, curiosity, maybe even a trace of pity. "You're a soldier." "Was," he corrected. "Now I'm just a man with a ship that barely flies." Vanna's gaze drifted to her sleeping daughter. The little one's hand glowed faintly blue as she dreamed, a natural light her kind gave off when their hearts were calm. It painted soft patterns across the metal floor. Reed stared at it for a long moment. "Never seen anything like that," he said softly. "She's from the core line of Lurians," Vanna said, her voice proud but distant. "Her light means she still believes in peace." Reed chuckled lightly. "Well, let's hope she never grows up." Vanna tilted her head, not sure if that was meant to be kind or sad. She changed the subject. "Will your people come for us?" Reed hesitated. "My people?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You're looking at all of them." For a while, the ship drifted in silence again. The only sound was the soft hum of life support. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a cold sea without waves. Finally, Reed stood up. "I'm going to check the engine core. You two stay put." As he walked past, Vanna asked quietly, "Why did you save us if it meant risking your life?" He stopped. For a few seconds, he didn't answer. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Because no one saved me when I needed it." He left before she could reply, the door sliding shut behind him. Vanna looked down at her daughter, her thoughts swirling like the storm they'd just escaped. Humans, she realized, were full of contradictions. Rough on the outside, but with strange hidden cracks where light could still get through. The little girl stirred, whispering in her sleep. "Mama, the man with the broken ship," he said. Vanna's heart tightened. She brushed her daughter's hair gently. "Sleep, little one. He's just human." But even as she said it, she glanced at the closed door again. Something told her that Captain Reed wasn't just another wanderer. He carried secrets, the kind that could save them, or destroy them all. And as the Arkstone floated quietly through the dark, unseen eyes far away blinked awake, tracking the human ship's faint energy trail. The mother didn't know it yet, but their rescue had not gone unnoticed. The storm might be over, but the real danger was only just beginning. The Arkstone floated through deep space like a tired bird gliding between stars. The storm was behind them now, but peace never truly followed Captain Reed. Every sound of the old ship reminded him of that. The rattle of loose panels, the low groan of the engines, the constant hum of systems that barely held together. For 3 days they drifted quietly. Reed repaired what he could, shared his limited food packs, and kept his distance. The alien mother, Vanna, stayed mostly silent, always keeping her daughter close. Sometimes Reed would catch the child, Leary she was called, watching him from behind crates, her curious glowing eyes studying every move he made. He pretended not to notice, but it made him uneasy. Not because she was dangerous, but because she reminded him of something long buried in the corners of his mind. A face, a voice, a promise he couldn't keep. That night, while he worked in the engine room, Reed noticed something strange. The damaged navigation screen, which had been completely fried from the lightning storm, was suddenly alive again. Every circuit lit, every reading clear. He frowned, tapping the controls. No way. He hadn't fixed it. No one had touched it. But the system worked perfectly. Footsteps echoed behind him. Vanna stood in the doorway, her face calm but guarded. It was her, she said quietly. Reed turned. The kid, how? Vanna stepped closer, lowering her voice. You've seen her light. It's not just glow. My daughter is different. She was born with what your people would call a core link. She can touch machines, not just use them. Feel them, heal them, Reed blinked.
You mean she's...
Part machine? No, Vanna said firmly. She's what comes after machines. Our people once created harmony between living and metal, but the war broke that bond. The old empires feared it. They hunted those like her, those who could speak to technology as if it were alive. Reed leaned back, trying to process it. And they wanted her dead. Vanna nodded slowly. They erased our colonies to make sure none of her kind survived. I ran before they found us. But when the floods came, there was nowhere left to run. Reed looked down at his hands, thinking, So that's why no one came for you. She nodded again. To them, my child is not a life. She is a threat, the words hung in the air. The ship's lights flickered once, as if the Arkstone itself had heard and disagreed. Reed glanced up at the ceiling. Guess my ship likes her, though. A small laugh escaped Vanna, soft and almost shy. Maybe your ship understands what humans forget. Machines have hearts too, if you listen. Just then, the door behind them opened a crack. Leary peeked in, rubbing her eyes. Mama? Vanna turned, instantly gentle. Go back to rest, little one. But Reed noticed something. Her fingertips glowed faint blue, the same shade as the navigation light. And the hum of the engine softened, steadier, almost peaceful. He crouched to her level. Hey, kid, you fixing my ship in your sleep? Leary blinked. It was sad, she said softly. So I told it not to be. Reed smiled, shaking his head. That's one way to do maintenance, she giggled. And even Vanna smiled for real that time, a small, tired smile, but real. For a brief moment, the cold emptiness of space didn't feel so lonely. But the warmth didn't last. A sharp beep cut through the quiet. Reed turned to the console, his expression darkening. A red signal blinked on the radar, faint but growing. Someone's tracking us, he said. Vanna's blood ran cold. It's them. They found us. Reed slammed his hand on the console, pulling up the readings. Fast ships. Military build, not mine. They're closing in fast. Vanna clutched her daughter close. They'll destroy us to take her. Reed's eyes hardened. Not while I'm still flying. He ran toward the cockpit, flipping switches, bringing the Arkstone to life again. The engines roared, and the ship tilted sharply as it changed direction. Vanna strapped herself and Leary into the seats near the wall, her hand trembling. Through the glass, the stars shifted. Behind them, distant shadows flickered, 3 dark shapes following in the void. Reed gritted his teeth. Looks like your friends don't like miracles, Vanna whispered. They're not friends. They're hunters. Outside, the darkness pulsed with red light as the enemy ships drew closer. Reed tightened his grip on the controls. Then let's give them a chase worth remembering. The Arkstone lurched forward, its old engines roaring louder than ever. And as the stars blurred around them, Leary looked out the window and whispered softly, almost to herself, "Don't worry, Mama. I can help him." Her small hand began to glow again, brighter this time, and for the first time in years the old ship sounded alive. The stars turned into streaks of silver light as the Arkstone tore through the void. The old cruiser had never flown this fast before. Its engines screamed, the hull rattled, and warning lights flashed across every console. But Captain Reed didn't slow down. Behind them, 3 hunter ships followed, sleek, black, and deadly, their plasma trails slicing through the darkness like blades. "Hold on back there," Reed shouted, jerking the controls as a red blast zipped past the cockpit, missing them by inches. The entire ship shook from the shockwave. In the rear cabin, Vanna held Leary close, trying to shield her as sparks rained from the ceiling. The mother's eyes were wide with terror, but she refused to scream. She'd run her entire life, from armies, from floods, from fate itself, but not today. Not with her daughter watching. "Reed," she called out, her voice trembling. "You can't outrun them. Their ships are built for war." Reed grinned through gritted teeth. "Good thing I don't play fair." He flipped a switch on the dashboard. "Let's see how you handle a human trick or two." With a sharp pull, the Arkstone dove into an asteroid field, a graveyard of floating rocks and shattered moons. The hunters followed, firing blindly through the debris. Explosions lit up the darkness like silent fireworks. Reed spun the cruiser through narrow tunnels of stone, scraping the hull so close that sparks trailed behind. "You're insane," Vanna shouted. He laughed, wild and reckless. "Probably. But even with his crazy flying, they were losing ground. The enemy ships were faster, their targeting systems too precise. The radar beeped urgently. One ship was locking on. Reed cursed under his breath. "We're not going to make it." Then a small voice came from behind him. "I can help." He turned. Leary was standing near the engine core, her blue glow stronger than before. The light spread from her fingertips into the floor, running like electricity through the ship's veins. "Kid, no," he said quickly. "It's too dangerous." But she was already moving. The ship began to hum. Not the broken, tired hum Reed was used to, but a deep rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat waking from sleep. The lights flickered from red to blue. The controls in Reed's hands grew warm. "What's happening?" he whispered. Vanna's voice was low, almost reverent. "She's merging. She's speaking to your ship." Outside, the Arkstone suddenly surged forward. The engines glowed brighter than ever, trails of light spiraling behind like wings. The radar blinked. Their speed had doubled, then tripled. The hunters tried to match pace, but their sensors went wild. One crashed into an asteroid, exploding in silence. Another fired wildly, missing by miles. Reed could only stare at the controls, half in awe, half in terror. "She's overloading the core," he yelled. "If she pushes too far, we'll burn out." Vanna knelt beside her daughter, her voice steady but urgent. "Leary, you must stop soon. You're hurting yourself." The child's eyes were closed, her expression calm. "It's okay, Mama, the ship is talking to me. It wants to go home." A burst of light filled the cockpit. The last hunter fired one final shot, a glowing plasma bolt. But before it could hit, Arkstone vanished. Reed gasped. "Did we just jump?" Vanna finished softly. They had entered a slipstream, a kind of warp humans hadn't used for decades. Streams of blue and white light stretched endlessly outside the windows. Everything was quiet except the gentle hum of the ship and the sound of Leary's breathing slowing down. Reed looked back. The little girl was unconscious in her mother's arms, faint light still pulsing beneath her skin. He walked over, kneeling beside them. "She saved us," he said, voice low. Vanna nodded, tears in her eyes. "She always saves more than she should." Reed reached out and adjusted the blanket around Leary. "You've got one hell of a kid," he murmured. Then he stood, glancing at the star map flickering above the dashboard. The coordinates were new, ones he'd never seen before. "She didn't just jump us anywhere," he said slowly. "She picked a destination." Vanna looked up. "Where?" Reed stared at the glowing map. A small planet bathed in blue light, untouched and unnamed. "Somewhere clean," he said softly. "Somewhere alive." He exhaled, long and heavy. "Looks like your kid just charted us a miracle." Outside the ship, the slipstream bent and twisted, carrying the Arkstone toward the unknown. The chase was over. But none of them knew what waited at the end of this path, safety or another kind of danger entirely. All Reed knew was that for the first time in years, he wasn't running from something. He was flying towards something new. When the Arkstone finally dropped out of the slipstream, silence fell across the cockpit. No alarms, no engines straining, no distant hum of pursuit, only the gentle whisper of space. Through the wide front window, a new world floated into view. It was small, quiet, and beautiful. Blue oceans shimmered beneath golden clouds, and vast islands glowed softly with green light. The planet looked untouched, like it had been waiting for someone to come. Reed sat in his chair, shoulders tense, staring at it. His ship creaked softly around him, exhausted from the jump. Behind him, Vanna held her daughter, who was still sleeping. Leary's glow had faded, leaving her pale and tired but peaceful. "Where are we?" Vanna asked softly. Reed shook his head. "No registry marks. Not on any charts I've ever seen." "Your kid? She didn't pick a route. She picked a feeling." Vanna's eyes softened. "She found us a home." Reed didn't answer right away. He just stared at the planet, his reflection faint in the glass. For the first time in years, he didn't feel lost. For the first time since the war, he didn't hear ghosts in his head. Just quiet. Honest, living quiet. He turned to Vanna. "We'll scan for atmosphere first, make sure it's breathable. I don't want to melt the moment we step out." She smiled faintly. "Always cautious, human. Cautious keeps us alive." The ship's sensors hummed, lights blinking green one by one. Oxygen levels stable. Radiation minimal. Temperatures perfect. He let out a breath. "Looks like we got lucky." Vanna looked down at Leary and whispered, "Luck had nothing to do with it." A few hours later, Arkstone broke through the clouds. The engines hummed low, cutting through the golden mist as sunlight spilled across the cockpit. The view took their breath away. Fields of silver grass swayed beneath tall crystal trees, and lakes mirrored the light like liquid glass. Strange birds circled in the distance, their wings shimmering with color. Reed stared, speechless. "It's untouched. No settlements, no scanners, no beacons. Just life." Vanna stood beside him, her hand gently resting on the window. "It feels warm," she whispered, "like the world itself is alive." The ship landed softly on a rise overlooking a valley of glowing flowers. The ramp hissed open, letting in air that smelled of rain and sweetness. Vanna stepped out first, her boots sinking into soft soil. She lifted her face to the sunlight, eyes closed, breathing deeply. Tears welled up without her meaning to. For so long she had known only running, hiding, losing. Now for the first time she felt the world welcome her. Leary followed, wobbling on her feet but smiling. She reached out and touched a nearby flower. It bloomed instantly, glowing even brighter. Reed watched from the ramp, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Looks like the planet likes you too, kid." The girl giggled, spinning in the breeze. "It's happy we came." Reed finally stepped out himself, squinting at the horizon. He didn't know what to call this place or how long they'd be able to stay. But something inside him whispered that maybe this was where he was supposed to end up all along. He turned to Vanna. "You know, I never figured myself for a hero." She looked at him, her silver hair shining in the light. "You're not," she said gently. "You're something rarer, someone who still chooses good when no one's watching." Reed chuckled softly. "That almost sounds like a compliment." "It is," she replied. They stood in silence for a while, watching the child chase glowing butterflies near the edge of a stream. The wind played through the grass like a song. Reed finally said, "I could fix up the Arkstone, make her a home instead of a ship. She's old, but she's solid. Might even teach the kid how to fly one day." Vanna's eyes glimmered. She'd like that. "She thinks the ship talks to her." Reed smiled. "It does, just not to me." As the sun began to set, its light painted the sky in deep pink and gold. The three of them stood together on the hill, a human, an alien mother, and her daughter, alone in a galaxy that had forgotten mercy, yet somehow finding peace. Reed looked at the horizon and whispered, "Maybe this is what home feels like." And for the first time since the storms began, the universe didn't feel so big or so cruel. It felt alive again. It felt like a beginning. Far above them in the emptiness of space, the Arkstone's lights flickered once. Steady, strong, like the heartbeat of a machine that had finally found something worth living for.